We had an overview of CRMs. We had an overview of Trello. I talked about how I use Trello to manage my sales pipeline and how I use Trello to manage a buyer transaction. So now let's dig into how I use Trello to manage my seller transactions. So we have my workflow across the top here with the Get Market Ready, which is everything I do before a seller puts their house on the market. We also have all the marketing activities that I will do for the home while it's on the market. We have an open house list for all the open houses I will do for the house while it's on the market. We have an offers list for all the offers that might come in for a particular property. We've got a transactions list for all the transactions that had been accepted for the property, and then a card for, or a list for the transaction that closed on the property. So let's dig into the onboarding process. Very similar setup to what I use for my buyers. A little bit of information here at the top. I do a pre-presentation rundown before I go on my listing appointment. During the initial meeting, I just highlight some of the things that I want to remember to talk about, and I'll just review this checklist before I walk in. We have an onboarding checklist here for all the activities we need to do to get the house ready for the market. I've got all the supporting documents that the seller needs to fill out about the piece of property before it's ready to go on the market. So those are all the checklists I use for the onboarding process. And if you notice over here on the tools section, I do not have any documents uploaded like I did with the buyers. And the reason for that is that a lot of the documents that I send to sellers are state forms that change often, and a lot of times it doesn't help to have static reports on that one. Now, I could. There are several reports that will probably, or several documents that will never change that I could upload to the tools section. I just haven't gotten to that point yet. And if you notice, I also don't have any of the email templates like I did for the buyer started on this particular board yet as well. On the marketing section, I do like to keep an MLS data sheet here, and it's not an extensive list of all the MLS data. It is simply information that I gather about the home as I'm starting to talk to the potential sellers. So a lot of time, you know, you might have an address, or somebody might call you and say, hey, I've got a friend that has a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house over in a particular subdivision, and maybe that's all you know. I try to jot that information down here so I can start to prepare myself for when I talk to that particular client. And if I do have an address, obviously I'll start pulling previous MLS data, if it's on there, any tax information that might be on there, so I can start to prepare myself to talk to the potential sellers about their property in an intelligent way. I do like to write my remarks section for MLS here because I tend to go through a couple of copies. I might think about it for a couple of days before I have it. I used to do it in text files, but then I have all these text files floating around in the property file folder that I use, or and so I tend to put them in here now because I think it's more useful. Now, I have a marketing checklist that I do for every week the property is on the market. And if you guys are interested in where I came up with these checklists and where my inspiration came from, you should check out a program called The Paperless Agent. Chris Scott runs it. They do free webinars all the time talking about their marketing platform. I think they use that to sell some of their coaching services they offer. But if you really want to know how to market properties using technology, they are a great platform to go to. And they actually have a 12-week marketing plan. I've only put the 4 weeks here because I haven't yet had to go past 4 weeks on any of my properties, thank goodness. But that's the nature of the market we're in right now. So it's a pretty good reference for you to have. On the open houses, I do very simple stuff. I remind myself to add the open house information to the MLS. I prep an open house book, which I have at my open houses, that has all the information that any potential buyers could want about the particular property. I definitely send an email to the homeowners reminding them how to prep the home before not only open houses but also showings. And I call them about that as well to remind them. And in that particular call or email, I might highlight specific things that I know those sellers struggle with. And then pull the 8 open house directional signs. That is a good rule of thumb. I don't usually pull that many. I don't tend to need that many. So I usually leave it at 4. And that's kind of how I manage that open house process, right? So I definitely want to add the visitor emails and names to my database if they did not come in with agents, and I signify that on the open house sheet. And I definitely want to send my clients an email about the showing results and any feedback I got about the property. Offers. So this is another extensive card that I use. It's got only 46 items on this one because it's a little easier to manage a lot of the stuff for sellers than it is for buyers when it comes to checking things off of a checklist. On this particular one, I try to keep per property a little rundown of the most important information about a particular offer, which I have here. I keep, like my buyers, all the other agents' information here, the title company's information and the lender information, so that I can quickly reference those on my cell phone. I also keep track of all the critical dates as well. I do a checklist that I go through to make sure that the offer contained everything that it needs to contain. Pre-qualification is a big one. I also like to call the lender on every offer that I consider serious offers, just to confirm with the lender. It's just one more check that you can do for quality assurance. I have a transaction checklist. This one I think I copied directly from the buyer's checklist, so I did not have to recreate it. There are a few things that I think I added in here that are specific to sellers, but it gave me a good place to start, so I didn't have to rewrite it from scratch. And then again, I have my post-closing checklist, which is closing out the file, but also doing some marketing activities, adding the calls to my calendar for week 1, month 1, and year 1. Now, the other thing I do for all offers that I get in is on the labels. I like to label it if it's a great offer, a good offer, or a poor offer. And a lot of times these come up when you have, in our particular market, when you have properties under a certain threshold. There is a hot market here in DFW, and sometimes you might get 10 offers on a particular property. And not all of those offers are really going to be that great. Now, you still need to present them to your client, obviously. I like to do that in an Excel sheet. And then I highlight the top 3, 4, or 5 that I think that they should pay the most attention to. And it's not that I'm discounting those other offers, but I can look from the information and tell if those offers are realistically something that my sellers are going to accept. And that's a little bit about how I manage my seller transactions using Trello.